Hi there. I am going to offer a demonstration of your first presentation assignment. And this is where you assemble images of artists and artwork that you find very, very inspiring, compelling in a way that you want your own artwork to be. So it's not just every artwork you like. We probably like a lot of work that doesn't inspire us the same way the work we tend to make does. But there's lots of art, lots of great works of art that touch us in a very profound way, which is related to the work that we want to make. And so that's what this assignment is to kind of describe the world of artwork that feels very much like the work that you want to make. It's not a call to imitate or plagiarize. It's a call to get an identity in your mind of the company you're going to keep. The artwork you're going to make is going to sit very comfortably in the presence of all of that great work that you identify. This is the central thesis of the essay. I've put a copy in the class. The essay is called The Individual Talent, Tradition and the Individual Talent by T.S. Eliot. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a presentation along those lines. There's two real directions to go here. One is if you're kind of a new artist and you're just getting started, maybe you've made some work, maybe you've taken some classes and you're making work on your own, but now you're starting to think really about the work being a body of work, a cohesive unit that could very easily make an exhibition viable. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to think about that in this class and start developing and designing a whole body of work. So this is a tool to help you kind of identify the caliber, the quality, the nature, even the kind of general area of the work that you want to do. So that's what I'm going to demonstrate with this. But rather than the kind of just starting out artist, I don't fit that category. I've been at this a while. So I'm going to talk about and think about my art for 30 years, and this becomes a very powerful tool for me to ask myself the question, what can I think of, develop, what direction can I go? Is there a new direction that's right there in front of me that I haven't really thought of? And I can use this tool to see if I can spark something like that. So that's what this presentation is about. So I'm going to do that with you. So what you want to do is you want to go on to Zoom, and then you want to hit record, and then you can, from there, screen share. And that's what I'll do now. I'll hit the middle button in Zoom that says screen share, and then I'll pick the PowerPoint that I already have made and ready to go. And I just pick that, and I need to set it up with, and get it started. So then I get it started, and I can start my presentation. And this is something like where it would go. And I would like you to practice making a presentation in a professional manner. Think about the introductory line and think about how you're going to break out your ideas and show the work. And so you can practice that with this, talking about other people's work. So in Gestalt therapy, dream analysis, that's a very unique approach to analyzing dreams. And what always fascinated me about it is when you're looking at a dream from a Gestalt point of view, one of the questions you ask is, what's missing in this dream? And I've always been fascinated by that. So for instance, someone's going down a stairway and they're describing it, and you realize in that description, there's no handrail. There's nothing to keep them from falling. Well, that's a very powerful message. And so I like this metaphor. This is the same sort of, it's like dream analysis. I'm looking at my work over the last 30 years and asking myself, what's missing? Where's there a direction I haven't explored that might be of value? So that's where we're going. And I want to start with this piece because for a number of reasons. This is a very direct, simple, I think very profound piece, very gestural and yet very elegant and formal at the same time. It's only about 4 inches tall. It's from a series by Lisa Jeton called Tabletop Physics. And Lisa is a fantastic artist who's a former student of mine, and her work is very inspiring to me. And this particular series has really sparked a lot of thought. And you'll see how this fits in to my thinking. I should say that mostly I do sculpture and ceramics, though I do some other things as well. And so I'm going to start exploring where I could go. And as I look at what I have been doing, I know that I normally deal with message kind of work with political, social commentary, and I'm working with this idea of communicating something. And so the form of my piece, the visuals, are all in service of that message. And so here are 2 pieces that really exemplify that. These are from 1993, 94, 95. On the left is the Clan of the One-Breasted Women, and it's all about cancer. Both of these pieces are about cancer. Little professional thing I've noticed is that if you're going to do pieces on the subject of cancer, you had better have some storage because they're going to stay with you. So on the left, that piece is about 6 feet, 5.5 feet tall, and a bronze bust on the top. And the shelving has, the back of the shelving has MRI and X-ray imagery. And in the foreground are glasses. And every time I exhibit the piece, I fill those glasses with the water from the tap of the gallery I'm exhibiting in. And over the month it evaporates and it leaves a kind of a scum on the glass. And that's kind of the question about, well, what is that? And what does it mean that we're putting it in our bodies? And it was the title comes from a fabulous book called Refuge by Terry Tempest Williams, and the whole last chapter is about her family and their battle with breast cancer. The piece on the right is also a kind of a sad piece. It's called Marilyn's House is My House is Your House, and it is inspired by conversations I had with my friend and student Marilyn, who passed away from cancer many, many years ago. And I built this piece because in that conversation we're having, Marilyn began to speculate, well, where did it come from? What was it? Was it something in my house? Was it something I was eating? What caused this disease in my body? And so I built this piece, and then I created this rack for test tubes, and I filled all of the test tubes with materials I could find in my home. And that's what this whole piece is. So just to show you that for me, the form was a secondary consideration after the function. I wanted something to speak to a very specific issue. And so all the formal issues, all the forms and the colors and the materials were all determined in an effort to reach that, to make that communication. It's a great way of working, and I work that way for decades, but I'm feeling a transition. Here's work from graduate school. This is a series called Rounded with a Sleep, and it comes from a Shakespeare quote, "We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little lives are rounded with a sleep." And it always fascinated me that people could get into such mischief. We were only on the planet, if we're lucky, for 90 years or so. And how we do such terrible things sometimes, not always, but some of these are about that. And so on the left is, I think, number 5 or 6, and it's a piece completely buried in the contents of one TV set. And on the right, you can see it's filled with bones. Very, very content rich. I went from graduate school to teaching at the University of California at Santa Barbara, where I did this installation. And this is a piece through Strength travel tour of the world. I did an installation at the Santa Barbara Travel Bureau, commissioned by the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. And this was a piece that fit in with, it was very much a site-specific installation. And it was a promotional, I promoted this travel tour that was going to go from America, where we were going to see some of the places that our nuclear weapons were made. Then we were going to go to Europe to see, we had just placed the Pershing missiles in Germany. We're going to go visit them. And then we were going to go to Russia to talk to our fellow nuclear hostages. So again, very, very content rich material. But when I came up to this area to start teaching at Solano Community College and moving into Davis, I had started to notice a change in my work. It's still very content rich. This piece on the left called Rubble Rising, it's about a half a ton. It's about 6 feet tall. And it was made literally while listening to the Papa Bush as he was invading Iraq for the first time. And so this is called Rubble Rising. So again, very heavy content, but you can see there's a lot of emphasis on process and there's a lot of emphasis on surfaces and on form. So I'm starting to speak a little bit more through the form. Here's another case. This is 93, I think, yes, 93. It's called Architecture of Necessity. And again, another piece with some things to say about poverty and beauty. And it's about a 5 foot tall bronze with a steel base. And here is the maquette that I created in 2000 when I was on sabbatical and looking for a new kind of figure for myself to make. And this was, I made maquettes for about 3 months before I came up with this. And this has sparked a whole series of work. But I'm starting to think, I do a lot of figurative work. And so this is a search more for something that is not so much figure. So what I'm looking for is now what kinds of existing monuments, artwork that is out there that I would consider masterful, what kinds of existing monuments of art can I find to gather together to express this idea I have of maybe there's a new direction for me in my art. So this is a Japanese tea bowl for the tea ceremony. And I'm looking at this as a very real practice in my own artwork. I do make tea bowls. I do make flower vases for ikebana. And this is one that I made that was included in, it's now in the collection of the San Francisco Asian Art Museum. And this is an important work for me. And part of the idea of is that I'm shifting in a sense. Here's another of my tea bowls. This idea of shifting to where the message is conveyed through the form. These tea bowls are about a great deal. The tea ceremony is an opportunity to gather in a very peaceful environment with people you care about, and you have a ceremony where you're all very much present in the moment, looking at the beauty of the work that you're using and looking at the and also, you know, talking among yourselves. You talk only about aesthetics and philosophy. You don't talk about the guy at work. So it's a very peaceful kind of process, and I love the aesthetic of what is often referred to as Wabi and Sabi. So there's a lot of material in all that, but just to say, these are works that seem to be very close to what I want to bring into my sculpture and perhaps some two-dimensional work as well. Here are some flower vases for ikebana, and these are fascinating because each one is a kind of stage where the ikebana artist comes in and takes over the vase and finishes the composition. And these gorgeous compositions are made by the great artist Hedy DeSuyo. So now when I looked at the tea bowl and the tea ceremony, these are a couple of images here of paintings that I've made with the wood fire process. And these emerged from the tea bowls because after the tea ceremony, after you spend so much time admiring these beautiful works of art, they go back in a box. And I didn't want that. I wanted to still be able to look at them. I wanted to have them in my home and around me. So I came up with this idea of these panels, these paintings that I would make. And this one's about 11 by 22. And this one is about 22 square. And so gives you a sense of this is very much something that I want to bring more into the artwork. I think this is what we're talking about, this aesthetic where you can see there's gesture, there's spontaneity, there's structure, there's balance of form and color and shape. So I really want to work more with those kinds of ideas. So I'm thinking both about aesthetics, but I want to throw in one last idea, which I'll get to towards the end, which is this very specific kind of aesthetics, this Wabi and Sabi aesthetics, this kind of simple and rustic and natural. And along with, there's also a kind of quality of spontaneity and childlike directness that I'm very interested in, and I'll demonstrate that in a moment. But here's the aesthetics that I'm talking about, the Wabi and the Sabi, the presence. This is very simple, very direct. It's got a lot of presence. It's got a monumental quality, a lot of dignity and integrity, and it's true to its materials. It really is. It's a very simple little sake cup by the artist Shiro Tsujimura from Nara, Japan. And I'll show you a few more of his. Here's a tea bowl of Shiro's, Shiro Tsujimura. And again, the form is extraordinary. The surface is beautifully gestural. And I think these have taught me a lot about a kind of quiet, simple aesthetic. Here again is an Oribe style tea bowl by Shiro Tsujimura. And you can see that the gesture of the painting with the iron wash is so spontaneous and skilled and experienced. So this is something that also very much inspires me. And I'm also attracted to this kind of reaching out to contemporary art with an ancient form. So the ideas behind the shape of this tea bowl are about 400 years old, 450 years old. They come from Oribe. This is a piece by Suzuki Goro. And Suzuki Goro is kind of a radically expressive artist. I'll show you a few of his pieces. This is by another artist who takes the tradition of Japanese tea ceremony and blends it very beautifully with contemporary art. And this is a piece by Kichi Zayamon 15, who is one of the two living raku artists. The other one is his son. And that's a 15 generations of raku artists. And here you have another piece, another tea bowl by Suzuki Goro. And I don't know quite how to wrap my head around this, but I love the form is, again, that sort of radical Oribe distortion with just a free-spirited, childlike painting that is not supposed to work, but somehow it does. So now we're moving into other pieces where I find the kind of aesthetic that I'm interested in becoming more familiar with in my own work. And this is the fabulous painter Carol Dalton. This is a painting and collage combination. And again, you can see her surfaces have a lot of gesture, a lot of atmosphere. There's a lot of presence in the piece. And you're left with open questions. Your eye dances around the piece, you gaze at it, you contemplate it, and you're left with a feeling that it has a real presence, a real importance, but you're not quite sure what it all means. And I just love that. And here's a few more of her pieces. I also love the way that she uses language, that she uses texture, the proportions that she chooses in balancing these, in this case, quite a parallel and perpendicular structure. And you can see there's a kind of little schematic of almost a boat, and there's a little figure in there if you look long enough as well. And here's both a more simple and also a more narrative piece, because you have this very abstract open surface with lots of atmosphere, but you definitely have a narrative going with these little figures. So it's interesting because it's very much, Carol is an artist who has a tremendous aesthetic awareness that she works into her paintings. And at the same time, there is a way where at some point this kind of much more high profile imagery comes in, and just a small bit to bring in meaning and to add interest. This is a work by Robert Motherwell, and I'm just going to show you a few abstract expressionist paintings and action paintings. This is Robert Motherwell's painting, and sort of in the school of the perfect gesture, the perfect moment, just the simple brushstroke. I find his work very compelling. What's fascinating, there's a couple of artists that work like this. Here's another one. This is Franz Klein. And you can see it's quite different. And that's what fascinates me in part, is that it's a different kind of white. The gestures that he's doing with the black are very different. And they're very satisfying. Some of these can be as long as, I've stood in front of them that are 12 feet wide. They're amazing paintings to gaze upon and to enjoy. And I'm fascinated and yet completely uncertain why these are so compelling to me. But I think the essential gesture, the clarity, the simplicity, the vigor, all of these things these are the qualities I'm interested in bringing into a series of artwork. Here's another Franz Klein. And let's look one more time at Robert Motherwell, and you can really see this is quite a different black on white kind of experience. There's something very, very unique about Motherwell, and as compared to Klein. I'm compelled by both of the artists, but it's interesting that you can take a white surface and make black marks and have very, very, very different feelings of aesthetic. This is a piece by Richard Diebenkorn, one of my all-time favorite painters. In fact, he got me in trouble in graduate school because I was taking a course in minimalist painting. Actually, it wasn't supposed to be minimalist painting, but that was the specialty of the professor, and we ended up talking a lot about that. We were supposed to be talking about the art in Los Angeles after 1945, and it was really an interesting course in many ways. But one day the teacher said, Frank Stella is the best painter of the 1960s. And I looked around me and there were 80 students all taking notes, Frank Stella, best painter of the 1960s. And I was astonished that a statement like that could be said at a University of California at Santa Barbara in a class. This was art history. So being who I was, I raised my hand and I said, excuse me, Professor, I heard what you just said. And I was just wondering, I don't know. I know what you said was an art historical fact. What I don't understand is how that fact is established, because I'm just a studio artist and I'm here as part of my graduate study, and I don't understand how those kinds of facts can be established. And she looked at me, she didn't understand what I was really asking, but she gave me the perfect answer. She said, oh, Frank Stella was married to Barbara Rose. Barbara Rose was a critic, an art critic of tremendous repute and power and influence. And so that's what made Frank Stella such a great painter, is his choice in marriage. And that to me was a clear statement that we weren't talking about quality, we were talking about connections. So I thanked her very much. Anyway, that's a little longer story, but what I said to her after she said that was, I prefer Richard Diebenkorn, because I felt that what she was doing is describing to me a preference, an opinion. And so I thought, well, I'll give her my opinion. And so here's the artist that I chose to talk about. These are Richard Diebenkorn's. They again have this structure and this proportion and this amazing color, a sense of asymmetrical balance. I really, I can look at these pieces endlessly. They also have a lot of atmosphere in them. So, and here's another abstract painting. Again, a similar sense of proportion, a lot more texture, and a little bit brasher and bolder. So I'm just looking at these pieces. Here's the wonderful painter Mark Eanes from Benicia. He used to teach at Solano College. And he's giving us in this painting, again, a sense of balance and proportion and texture and color, all these things playing into this beautiful aesthetic. Here's another one of his pieces. So these are all works that seem to feed that same idea that I have about a certain kind of aesthetic and a presence in work that I want to achieve. Another artist is the painter Tracy Grubbs, and here is a painting she did of a sink that she saw in Alcatraz, the old prison that is now a national park. So she did this painting, and what is interesting about Tracy is she's so good about painting these. That's my daughter coming in. Sorry. And well, that's kind of a nice component. We'll keep that. So what she's so good at is she's basically the actual object of her painting is dissolving, as it is in real life too, rusting apart. But she's bringing this, it's blending and melting, and this kind of an entropy as it fills in with the space and the atmosphere. And I find her painting fascinating. Here's another one of a glass of water and a spray paint can. And again, it's the space and light between them that she's more interested in, I think, or as interested in the relationship between them from a distance. This compositional, it's a compositional approach, and it's very much grounded in a visual concern, and that's what I'm trying to emphasize that more. Content is great, but I want the content to emerge as I focus on the visuals. And here are three more pieces by Tracy. These are some kind of landscape project, and I'm going to go back and show them to you one more time and see. You don't know, you may or may not know what you're looking at. These are framed pieces on the wall, and these landscapes with texture, really quite lovely. And what you're looking at is Tracy has taken an old book and torn the pages out, and she's just mounting the book cover. We're looking at the inside cover pages. So brilliant series of work, really gorgeous. So, and here, this is, so now what I want to do is say, so I've shown you a lot of paintings. How does this translate into objects? Because primarily I make objects. So I'm thinking, well, what ways can this translate into objects? And I don't really know yet. I'm still trying to develop this idea of a series. But here again, we're joining Lisa Jeton's work. This is another piece from the Tabletop Physics series. And here's a different piece of Lisa's. This is a piece of flotsam that she found when she was an artist in residence in San Diego. She found this large piece of styrofoam encrusted with barnacles and things from being in the sea for a long period of time, and mounted it. So that was her piece, is finding this object and mounting it. And on the left, you see a piece of wood-fired porcelain attached to yet another found piece of material. And I love the clarity, the integrity, the simplicity with which Lisa finds these pieces and acknowledges, almost allows their inherent aesthetic principles to speak. And these are pieces that were cast off, literally thrown away, and Lisa has reclaimed them. Here's one more piece by Lisa from the Tabletop Physics series. And this is in an exhibition that I included her in. I believe this one, yeah, this one is in Germany, in Berlin. And this piece is about 2 inches tall, and that's a bicycle chain link at the bottom of the wood-fired piece of ceramics. So again, this is kind of between painting and object here. You can see that this is a piece of corrugated cardboard that has been stressed, and then lots of collage. This is by the great artist Kurt Schwitters, a kind of early turn-of-the-century artist working in Germany and then chased out by Hitler and then working mostly in England. Here's another one of his pieces. He was a big believer in that anything at all could be put into the art. And he was so good about design, about proportions and balance. And he really had a great sense of the interaction of color. So he's somebody who's on my mind quite a bit. Also in the 3D realm is George Herms, and he's the poet of refuse. He is really a man who takes things that are thrown away and jettisoned and no longer considered of value and gives them, lets them speak. And he does it all with this really some simple, elegant composition, but it's never overly mannered. It's always very direct and very spontaneous, but at the same time, very carefully designed and laid out. These are all pieces of George Herms, cast off materials, very simply composed. This is a ceramic artist, and I do work in ceramics, and so these are larger objects. They're about 3 feet tall, and this is the artist Graham Marks. And I find here, these are just the enigmatic quality of these objects, the geology of them, the texture, the presence, the mass, all of these things attract me. And again, all of these pieces I'm showing you, they don't have an overt content. They're not telling a very direct, proud, it's kind of, they're not trying to tell you something that you can pick up, like reading a letter. They're really communicating a sense. They're communicating to your senses, and that's more what I'm thinking about. Another artist who makes these compelling objects is an artist named Martin Purrier. These pieces I'm about to show you are all about 5 feet tall. And what attracts me, the forms are simple, often called minimal, but the richness of the materials that he uses and the techniques, the impeccable craftsmanship that he's capable of in form brings so much more to the minimal shapes that he uses. Here's one piece in here by another artist that often works in this way, and this is Isamu Noguchi. Isamu Noguchi, another fan, another great artist. Here's an artist that I got to know through teaching at Solano. This is Juan Santiago, who's now in Southern Oregon at Southern Oregon State University in Ashland, Oregon. And he's a great man and a great artist, and he has a unique way of handling clay that I greatly admire. And he makes objects that inspire me greatly. So now we're getting to the end here, and we're kind of making a little transition to the second component that I'm also interested in contemplating for a series. And you can see here, this piece has all of that presence of an object that perhaps a Martin Purrier has or that Graham Marks has. But this is one of my favorite sculptors. This is Robert Brady. And this form, which could be absolutely abstract, becomes very animated with just 2 holes. He puts 2 holes in it, and everybody sees a figure. And welcome to instruction during COVID. That would be my dog. I can talk to you in a little bit. I can't read that from here.
It says Kamala Harris speaking on TV soon. Mom told me to tell you.
Okay. Kamala Harris is speaking on TV soon. I'm thinking this presentation is getting more interesting by the moment. Okay, so I'm going to finish this up and go watch Kamala Harris speak on TV. So Robert Brady's piece is a nice transition piece for this because you can see that it has a real kind of presence and an abstract quality to it, but it also has a kind of playful animated quality from those 2 holes. And that leads me into that playful quality. And so the artists that come to mind for me right now with that, I've just put a few in to talk about. And this is Basquiat, who I have tremendous admiration for. His work and the directness and the just uninhibited nature of his imagery. This is a piece I found which really shocked me. I didn't realize he had done this. Back in '83, he did a piece about some police who found an African-American man spray painting, which is something that he did all the time, and they beat him to death. And so, you know, this problem that we have in our culture has been with us for so long. And here in 1983, an artist captured it exactly and ironically in all this happy, bright, childlike material. This is a really haunting piece for me. Another artist who I really admire is Squeak. Yes, her first name is Squeak Carnwath. And Squeak Carnwath lives in Oakland and is known around the world. And I just, these paintings are about 5 feet square. And they, I love the use of language, the kind of incidental, casual drawing, along with some very interesting color and shape usage. Um, uh, and of course, she drew a pot, so that's very exciting. This is a more content-based piece, and she does these. She does things that are very political in nature. As well. So she crosses that line to where I've been with very direct pieces as well. Though here you can see her aesthetic. She's still very much doing this piece with a very strong operating aesthetic in her work. So I thought I'd finish by showing you a few pieces I think are heading in the directions, some of the directions we've talked about. These are some assemblages that I've made. This one is called Three Shot, and it is just assembled objects. This one is called The White House Talks of Our Daughters, and it was inspired by a piece of metal that the poet Michael Wiley wrote on and gave back to me as a collaborative project. He gave me that piece of metal, and every one of those words are words that were used by the Trump campaign in 2016. So the piece that's where the piece gets its name. The White House Talks of Our Daughters. And Michael, when he gave me the piece, said, he said, this is what our new president, this is how our new president talks about my daughter. He made it very personal. And I have a daughter, as you've heard. And so it is profoundly disturbing to see these things. And so that piece didn't quite pass the test of being less content driven. But I think if we look at it, we'll go back. And if we look at it, the quality of the piece has a lot of that aesthetic that I'm talking about, with just this pretty big intervention of content. Just showing you a few paintings again, because I do still make these, and these are very much right at the heart of what I'd like to see. Maybe there's a whole series generated. What would it look like to bring this quality of surface and form into 3 dimensions? This is a very 2-dimensional piece. That's one question. And I thought I'd put this in as the last image, because this is a piece that I made many years ago. And you can see in it a lot of these qualities that I want to emphasize now do come into my work. And so this isn't so much something that I'm searching for as something I'm hoping to concentrate and kind of be able to work directly with in my future series. This would be this body of work. So these are the pieces I'm going to contemplate as I look for a series to go in a different direction. And that's the best I think that this exercise can do for you, is to give you give you a sense of where you need to go in your heart, in your head, and in the world to find the work that you need to make. And